Marcus sat in the back row of the Galactic Combat Training Academy, watching as his alien classmates demonstrated their species' traditional weapons. The classroom buzzed with excitement as each student showed off their ancestral fighting tools. The Kytherian beside him had brought a plasma lance that could melt through steel, while the Zephyrian across the aisle wielded energy claws that crackled with electric death. Instructor Vexstar, a towering Draknari with scales that shifted color when he was pleased, nodded approvingly at each demonstration. His forearms moved gracefully as he examined each weapon, his reptilian features showing genuine interest in the advanced technology before him. "Excellent work, cadets," Vexstar rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen 1,000 battles. "Each of your species has developed remarkable tools of war. The precision of Altarian crystal blades, the devastating power of Centaurian ion cannons, the elegant design of Vorthan neural disruptors." He paused, his golden eyes scanning the room before settling on Marcus. "Now then, Cadet Chen. I believe you are our only human representative in this advanced class." Marcus felt every pair of alien eyes turn toward him. Some looked curious, others seemed almost pitying. Humans were relatively new to the Galactic Federation, having only made contact 15 years ago. Most species saw them as primitive newcomers who had barely mastered interstellar travel. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, straightening in his chair. The furniture creaked under his movement, a stark reminder of how everything in the academy was built for beings much larger and stronger than humans. "And what traditional weapon have you brought to demonstrate?" Vexstar asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "I must admit, human military technology is not something I am familiar with. Your species is still adapting to galactic standard equipment." Marcus glanced around the room at the array of energy weapons, molecular disruptors, and gravity manipulators his classmates had displayed. Each piece of technology was worth more than most planets' entire defense budgets. They hummed with power, glowed with contained energy, and radiated the kind of destructive potential that could level cities. "Well, sir," Marcus said slowly, "I didn't exactly bring a traditional weapon with me." A few of his classmates chuckled. The Nexurian in the front row, whose people had conquered 3 star systems with their quantum destabilizers, whispered something to his neighbor that made them both laugh. Vexstar's scales shifted to a neutral blue-gray, the color he displayed when he was trying not to show disappointment. "I see. Perhaps your people have not yet developed sophisticated weapons technology? This is understandable. Many species require centuries to advance from basic projectile weapons to energy-based systems. Actually," Marcus said, standing up from his chair, "we have plenty of weapons technology. Railguns, fusion bombs, plasma rifles, antimatter torpedoes. We've got all that stuff." He looked around the room at the confused faces staring back at him. "But, you asked for traditional weapons. The kind our ancestors used." The Kytherian who had demonstrated the plasma lance tilted his crystalline head. "Your ancestors? You mean from before your species achieved spaceflight?" "Way before," Marcus confirmed. "I'm talking about weapons that humans used thousands of years ago. Before we had gunpowder, before we had metalworking, before we even had agriculture." Instructor Vexstar's forearms crossed in a gesture that, among his people, indicated skeptical interest. "Are you suggesting that these primitive weapons would be relevant to modern combat training?" "Not suggesting," Marcus said with a grin that made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. Humans showing teeth was still an unsettling sight to many species. "I'm saying they're probably more dangerous than anything you've seen today." The classroom erupted in skeptical chatter. The Nexurian in the front row actually stood up, his bioluminescent patches flashing in patterns that indicated amusement. "Human," the Nexurian said, "I have studied your species since you joined the Federation. Your ancestors fought with sharpened sticks and rocks. My people were building quantum computers when your kind was still living in caves." Marcus nodded agreeably. "That's probably true. Your people are definitely more advanced than humans in most ways." He looked around the room. "All of your people are. But that doesn't mean our weapons were less effective." Vexstar held up one clawed hand for silence. "Cadet Chen, are you seriously claiming that primitive human weapons could compete with modern galactic technology?" "I'm claiming they could probably kill everyone in this room faster than any of the fancy toys you've been showing off," Marcus replied calmly. The silence that followed was deafening. Several aliens exchanged glances that clearly said they thought the human had lost his mind. The Draknari instructor's scale shifted to deep purple, a color that indicated he was either very angry or very intrigued. "That is quite a claim, Cadet," Vexstar said slowly. "But, since you have not brought a weapon to demonstrate, I fail to see how you could prove such an assertion." Marcus looked around the classroom, his eyes taking in the standard galactic furniture. Heavy desks made from Zentorian steel composite, chairs constructed from woven carbon fibers, and support beams of crystallized aluminum. All of it built to withstand the casual destructive strength of species much more powerful than humans. "Actually," Marcus said, "I can prove it right now. All I need is about 10 minutes and some of this classroom furniture." The alien students began talking among themselves again, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones that human ears could barely process. Several were clearly laughing at what they assumed was an elaborate joke. Vexstar's scales had shifted to bright orange now, a color that meant he was extremely interested in what was about to happen. "Very well, Cadet Shen. I will give you 10 minutes to construct a weapon from classroom materials. Then, you will demonstrate how this primitive human technology could be more effective than advanced galactic weapons." Marcus cracked his knuckles, a sound that made several aliens flinch. "Perfect. But, I should probably mention that you'll want to evacuate the first 3 rows of seats. What I'm about to build has a range of about 50 meters, and I'd hate for anyone to get hurt during the demonstration." The Nexorian who had been mocking him earlier scoffed. "I will remain exactly where I am, human. I am confident that whatever primitive stick you construct will pose no threat to someone protected by modern defensive technology." "Your choice," Marcus said with a shrug. He walked to the front of the classroom and began examining the furniture with the kind of careful attention usually reserved for priceless artifacts. "Just remember, you were warned." As he ran his hands along the edge of a desk, testing its flexibility and strength, Marcus smiled to himself. His classmates had no idea what they were about to witness. They thought human weapons were primitive because they were old. They didn't understand that some technologies persisted for thousands of years for a very simple reason: they worked so well that no improvement was necessary. The bow was arguably the most perfect weapon ever designed. It was simple enough that a child could understand its principles, reliable enough to function in any environment, and deadly enough that even modern body armor struggled to stop a well-placed arrow. More importantly, it could be built from almost any materials, required no power source, made almost no sound when fired, and could launch projectiles with enough force to punch through military-grade composites. Marcus had been hunting with traditional bows since he was 8 years old. His grandfather, a former Special Forces operator, had insisted that every Chen learn the old ways before they were allowed to touch modern weapons. "Technology fails," the old man had said. "But physics is forever." As Marcus began disassembling a chair, separating the flexible carbon fiber from the rigid support struts, he wondered if his grandfather had ever imagined his lessons being put to use in a classroom full of aliens 50 light-years from Earth. Probably not. But the old soldier would have approved of the principle: when surrounded by enemies who underestimate you, sometimes the best strategy is to prove them catastrophically wrong. Marcus worked methodically, his hands moving with practiced precision as he separated the classroom furniture into its component materials. The carbon fiber weaving from the chair backs would form the body of his bow, while the steel support struts would provide the necessary rigidity for the limbs. His classmates watched with growing confusion as he began what looked like systematic vandalism of Academy property. "Cadet Chen," Instructor Vexstar rumbled, his scales shifting to a concerned yellow-green, "I hope you realize that you will be responsible for replacing any equipment you damage during this demonstration." "Already factored into my budget," Marcus replied without looking up from his work. He was using his multi-tool to carefully strip away the outer polymer coating from a support beam, revealing the crystallized aluminum underneath. Though I should mention that understanding how this weapon works might save the Academy money in the long run. The Zephyrian with the energy claws leaned forward in her seat. How could a primitive weapon possibly save an advanced institution money? Marcus paused in his work and looked up at her. "Because once you see what I'm building, you'll understand why human security forces don't need to carry expensive energy weapons. We can make equally effective tools out of whatever happens to be lying around." Several aliens exchanged the kind of looks that suggested they thought the human was suffering from some kind of mental breakdown. The concept of deliberately choosing primitive technology over advanced alternatives was so alien to their way of thinking that they couldn't process it as anything other than insanity. The Nexorian in the front row activated his translation device and spoke in rapid, clicking syllables to his companion. The device converted his words into standard galactic, he's either the greatest warrior in human history or completely delusional. I'm leaning toward delusional. Marcus grinned as he began binding the carbon fiber strips together with wire salvaged from the classroom's lighting system. You know, in my culture, we have a saying, the best swordsman in the world doesn't fear the second best swordsman. He fears the worst swordsman, because he has no idea what that idiot is going to do. Are you calling yourself the worst bowman? Asked the Kytherian, his crystalline features reflecting the classroom lights in prismatic patterns. Not the worst, Marcus replied, testing the flex of his improvised bow stave. But, I am definitely an idiot. At least, that's what my instructors back on Earth used to say. He began shaping the crystallized aluminum into arrow shafts, using his multi-tools cutting laser to achieve precise measurements. They said only an idiot would volunteer for off-world training when he could have stayed home and made a fortune teaching corporate executives how to hunt. Instructor Vextar's forearms moved in a pattern that indicated deep thought. Cadet Chen, are you implying that hunting is a significant activity among humans? Hunting is how we survived for about 99% of our species' existence, Marcus said, carefully notching his improvised arrows. Most humans don't hunt anymore, but some of us keep the old skills alive. You know, just in case. Just in case of what? The Zephyrian asked. Marcus looked up from his work, and, for a moment, something predatory flickered in his eyes. Just in case we ever need to kill something that's bigger, stronger, and smarter than we are. The classroom fell silent. Several aliens shifted uncomfortably as they processed the implications of that statement. The idea that a species might deliberately maintain primitive killing skills just in case was disturbing enough. The suggestion that they might need to use those skills against superior opponents was genuinely frightening. The Draknari instructor's scales had shifted to deep blue, a color that indicated he was reassessing everything he thought he knew about the situation. Cadet, are you saying that humans maintain these ancient weapons specifically for fighting advanced opponents? Not specifically, Marcus said, beginning to string his bow with wire stripped from the classroom's computer terminals. We maintain them because they work. Because they're reliable. Because they don't run out of power or need maintenance or fail when you need them most. He tested the string tension and nodded with satisfaction. But, yeah, they're also really good for fighting things that are bigger and stronger than humans. How can that be possible? Demanded the Nexorian. Advanced species have better armor, better shields, better defensive technology. Marcus finished his last arrow and held it up for inspection. The crystallized aluminum shaft gleamed under the classroom lights, and he had carefully sharpened the tip to a needlepoint. Want to know a secret about advanced defensive technology? What secret? Asked the Kytherian. It's designed to stop advanced offensive technology. Marcus knocked the arrow and drew the bow to full extension. The improvised weapon creaked under the strain, but held together perfectly. Energy shields are great against plasma bolts and particle beams. Kinetic barriers work wonderfully against railgun slugs and fusion warheads. But they're not designed to stop a pointy stick moving at 200 meters per second. The alien students stared at the bow in Marcus's hands with new understanding. It was such a simple device that their advanced minds had dismissed it as irrelevant. But simplicity, they were beginning to realize, might be its greatest strength. Instructor Vextar's scales had shifted to bright red, the color of alarm. Cadet Chen, please lower that weapon immediately. You are correct that our defensive systems are not calibrated for such primitive projectiles. Don't worry, Marcus said, but he didn't lower the bow. I'm not going to shoot any of you. But I think a demonstration is in order. He turned toward the reinforced wall at the back of the classroom, where a practice target had been set up for energy weapon demonstrations. See that target? It's made from compressed neutronium composite. According to the specs, it can absorb a direct hit from a military-grade plasma cannon without showing damage. That is correct, Vextar confirmed nervously. It cost the Academy 17 million credits and is rated to withstand anything short of a ship-mounted particle beam. Marcus drew the bow back to its full extension and took careful aim. Want to bet? Before anyone could stop him, he released the arrow. It flew across the classroom in complete silence, moving so fast that most of the aliens couldn't track its flight. There was a sharp crack as it struck the target, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy falling to the floor. Every alien in the classroom stared in shock at the practice target. The arrow had punched completely through the neutronium composite and embedded itself in the wall behind it. The indestructible target now had a perfectly round hole through its center. Impossible, whispered the Nexorian. Physics, Marcus corrected cheerfully. Kinetic energy equals mass times velocity squared. A dense projectile moving at high speed delivers enormous concentrated force. Your fancy target can absorb energy weapons because they spread their force over a wide area. But, all that force concentrated into a few square millimeters? He shrugged. Even neutronium has its limits. The Zephyrian raised one clawed hand tentatively. How fast was that projectile moving? Marcus did some quick mental calculations. About 250 meters per second. Which probably delivered somewhere around 800 joules of kinetic energy to a contact area of maybe 2 square millimeters. He grinned at their horrified expressions. That's enough concentrated force to punch through most personal armor, even if it's designed to stop energy weapons. Instructor Vextar's scales were now cycling through colors so rapidly that they looked like a kaleidoscope. Cadet Chen, are you telling me that you just destroyed 17 million credits worth of equipment with a weapon you built from classroom furniture? Actually, Marcus said, walking over to examine the target, I think I can probably repair this. The hole is very clean, and neutronium composite can be welded if you have the right equipment. He turned back to face the class. But, yes, I did just prove that a 10,000-year-old human weapon can defeat the most advanced defensive technology in the galaxy. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several aliens frantically taking notes on their personal devices. The Nexorian who had been so dismissive earlier was recording everything, his bioluminescent patches flashing in rapid sequences that indicated extreme agitation. This changes everything, the Kytherian whispered. If primitive kinetic weapons can defeat modern defenses. Then, maybe primitive isn't the right word, Marcus suggested. Maybe the right word is perfected. He held up his improvised bow. This design is basically unchanged from weapons that human ancestors used 30,000 years ago. It's that old because it works that well. Sometimes the first solution is the best solution. Instructor Vextar slowly approached the damaged target, his forearms moving in patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Cadet Chen, I believe I owe you an apology. And, perhaps the Academy owes human military science a considerable debt of respect. No debt necessary, Marcus said. But, I do have a question. Yes? When do we start advanced training? Word of the classroom demonstration spread through the Galactic Combat Training Academy faster than a quantum communication pulse. By the next morning, Marcus found himself sitting in the office of Admiral Cathran, the Academy's commanding officer. The massive Valdorian's 6 eyes studied the human with an intensity that made most cadets extremely uncomfortable. Cadet Chen, the Admiral said, his voice carrying harmonics that human ears could barely detect, I understand you destroyed a 17 million credit practice target with a weapon constructed from furniture. Yes, sir, Marcus replied. Though I should mention that I offered to repair the damage. That will not be necessary, Admiral Cathran said, waving one of his 4 tentacle arms dismissively. The target has been preserved as evidence of your demonstration. He leaned forward in his chair, which was roughly the size of a human vehicle. What concerns me, Cadet, is not the damage you caused, but the implications of how you caused it. Marcus waited silently. He had learned during his time at the Academy that most alien species preferred to think through their statements completely before expecting a response. Our defensive technologies, the Admiral continued, have been developed over thousands of years by the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They represent the pinnacle of engineering achievement. And, yet you defeated them with what amounts to a pointed stick and string. To be fair, sir, Marcus said carefully, it was a really good pointed stick. One of Admiral Cathran's eyes focused on Marcus while the others continued scanning various data displays around his office. Do not attempt humor with me, Cadet. This is a serious strategic concern. If one human with improvised materials can defeat our best defensive technology, what does that say about our readiness to face human military forces? With respect, sir, Marcus said, I think you're asking the wrong question. All 6 of the Admiral's eyes snapped to focus on Marcus simultaneously. In Valdorian body language, this was equivalent to a human pointing a weapon at someone. Explain. The question isn't whether humans are a threat to galactic security, Marcus said. The question is whether you want humans as allies or enemies when something really dangerous shows up. The Admiral's tentacle arms coiled and uncoiled in a pattern that indicated deep thought. Something dangerous? Cadet, we are the galactic community. We represent dozens of advanced civilizations. What could possibly threaten us? Marcus considered his words carefully. During his time at the Academy, he had access to galactic databases and historical records. He had learned things about the universe that most humans didn't know. Things that sometimes kept him awake at night. Admiral, he said slowly, how many civilizations have you made contact with in the past 5,000 years? Approximately 47, Kethran replied immediately. Including humanity. And how many of those civilizations chose to join the galactic community peacefully? All of them, the Admiral said. We have been very fortunate in that regard. Marcus nodded. Has it occurred to you that 47 out of 47 peaceful first contacts might be statistically unlikely? Admiral Kethran's tentacles went completely still. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe the reason you keep meeting peaceful civilizations is because the non-peaceful ones are busy doing something else. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. Sir, in human history, when explorers from an advanced civilization encountered primitive peoples, what usually happened? The Admiral was silent for a long moment. I see your point, Cadet. You believe that aggressive civilizations might avoid contact with us until they are ready to engage on their own terms. More than that, Marcus said. I think aggressive civilizations might be watching you. Learning about your technologies, your defensive capabilities, your military doctrines. And, I think when they finally decide to make contact, it won't be peaceful. And, you believe humans would be useful allies in such a conflict? Marcus thought about his grandfather's stories, about human history, about the long list of species that had underestimated humanity's capacity for violence. Admiral, humans have been fighting other humans for our entire history. We've had to develop weapons and tactics to defeat opponents who were exactly as smart, exactly as resourceful, and exactly as motivated as we were. Most galactic species developed their military technology for defense against beasts or natural disasters. Humans developed ours specifically to kill other thinking beings who were trying to kill us first. The Admiral's skin began changing color, shifting through a spectrum that indicated profound unease. That is a disturbing perspective, Cadet. But, probably a useful one, Marcus said. Sir, yesterday I built a bow from classroom furniture and punched a hole through your best armor. That wasn't because I'm some kind of super soldier. I'm actually pretty average by human standards. It was because humans have had 10,000 years to perfect the art of killing things that don't want to die. And, you believe this expertise would be valuable in defending the galactic community? I believe it would be essential, Marcus said firmly. Because whatever aggressive civilizations are out there, they've probably spent those same 10,000 years perfecting their own arts of war. When they finally decide to move against the galactic community, you're going to need allies who understand how predators think. Admiral Kethran was quiet for several minutes, his 6 eyes moving independently as he processed information from multiple data streams. When he finally spoke, his voice carried new undertones that Marcus couldn't identify. Cadet Chen, I am going to make you an offer that has never been extended to a first-year student. I want you to skip the remainder of basic training and move directly to our advanced strategic warfare program. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. The advanced program was reserved for students who had already completed 4 years of basic training and demonstrated exceptional ability. Sir, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for advanced training. After yesterday's demonstration, I am not concerned about your qualifications, the Admiral replied. What concerns me is time. If your theories about hidden aggressive civilizations are correct, we may not have the luxury of a normal training timeline. What exactly would the advanced program involve? You would be working directly with our strategic planning department to develop new defensive doctrines. Specifically, you would help us understand how to defend against opponents who think like humans. The Admiral's tentacles coiled into patterns that indicated extreme seriousness. You would also be tasked with training selected personnel in human combat methodologies. Marcus thought about his classmates' reactions to the bow demonstration. Sir, with respect, I'm not sure most galactic species could adapt to human-style combat. It requires a certain flexibility of thinking. Explain. Human combat tactics are based on the assumption that your opponent is at least as smart as you are and is actively trying to kill you. This means you have to think like a predator and a prey animal simultaneously. You have to be aggressive enough to attack when necessary, but paranoid enough to assume that everything is a trap. Marcus paused. Most peaceful species find this kind of thinking psychologically disturbing. Perhaps, Admiral Kethran said. But, perhaps psychological discomfort is preferable to extinction. The weight of that statement settled over the office like a physical presence. Marcus realized that the Admiral wasn't just offering him advanced training, he was asking him to help prepare the galaxy for war. Sir, Marcus said quietly, if I accept this position, I need to be honest about something. Yes? Training galactic forces to fight like humans won't just make them more effective against outside threats. It will also make them more dangerous to each other. Human combat doctrine doesn't really distinguish between foreign enemies and domestic threats. Once you teach someone to think like a predator, they tend to stay that way. Admiral Kethran's skin shifted to deep purple, a color that indicated he was weighing risks against benefits. Are you advising me to withdraw the offer? No, sir. I'm advising you to be very careful about who you give this training to. And to make sure you have safeguards in place to prevent it from being used against member species. Your candor is appreciated, Cadet. The Admiral's tentacles moved in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of respect. It reinforces my belief that humans may be exactly what the galactic community needs, allies who understand both the necessity of violence and the responsibility that comes with it. Marcus stood up from his chair and saluted in the human fashion. Then, I accept your offer, Admiral. When do I start? Immediately, Admiral Kethran replied. Your first assignment is to prepare a comprehensive analysis of how an aggressive civilization might attack the galactic community, based on your understanding of human military thinking. How comprehensive? The Admiral's 6 eyes focused on Marcus with laser intensity. Comprehensive enough that if hostile aliens arrived tomorrow with weapons we've never seen and tactics we don't understand, we would still know how to fight them. Marcus felt a familiar chill run down his spine, the same feeling he got when his grandfather talked about preparing for wars that might never come. Sir, you want me to figure out how to destroy the galactic community? Exactly. Because if you can figure out how to destroy us, perhaps you can also figure out how to save us. As Marcus left the Admiral's office, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just volunteered for the most important and dangerous assignment of his life. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, predators were watching and waiting. And, when they finally decided to move, humanity would be ready. 3 months after Marcus began his work with the Strategic Planning Department, the emergency alert systems throughout the Galactic Combat Training Academy screamed to life. The piercing harmonics were designed to penetrate the hearing ranges of dozens of different species, creating a symphony of urgency that no sentient being could ignore. Marcus looked up from his tactical analysis reports as Admiral Kethran stepped forward, his 6 eyes focusing on the assembled commanders. You have your orders. Cadet Chen has tactical authority for this engagement. I suggest you listen carefully to what he has to say. The next hour passed in tense preparation as Galactic Defense Forces repositioned according to Marcus's unconventional strategy. Ships that should have been advancing to engage the unknown vessels instead pulled back to defensive positions. Weapons platforms powered down their primary systems, broadcasting electromagnetic signatures that suggested mechanical failure rather than tactical readiness. To any observer, it would appear that the galactic community was in complete disarray, unable to mount an effective response to the approaching threat. Marcus watched the unknown ships adjust their approach as they detected the apparent chaos in the defense grid. They were definitely intelligent, altering their formation to take advantage of what seemed like gaps in the galactic response. More importantly, they were slowing down, clearly intending to gather detailed sensor readings of the confused defensive positions. Sir, reported Lieutenant Kexera from the sensor station, the unknown ships are launching smaller craft. Analysis suggests they are reconnaissance drones. Perfect, Marcus said with satisfaction. They're getting overconfident. Admiral Kethran moved closer to Marcus, speaking quietly so the other officers couldn't hear. Cadet, I hope you have more to this strategy than simply appearing vulnerable. Much more, Marcus replied. Admiral, in approximately 20 minutes, those ships are going to learn why humans have survived as a species for so long despite being physically inferior to most of the things that have tried to kill us. And, what lesson is that? Marcus's expression shifted into something that reminded the Admiral that humans were descended from persistence predators. That the most dangerous trap is the one the prey walks into willingly. As the unknown ships drew closer to the inner defense grid, their reconnaissance drones spread out to scan what appeared to be poorly defended installations. The ships themselves began transmitting in what the galactic computers identified as a military command frequency, probably coordinating their intelligence-gathering operation. Marcus waited until the moment was perfect. When the unknown ships were deep within the defense grid, their drones scattered across a wide area, their attention focused on cataloging what they believed to be a weakened, disorganized enemy. Then, he gave the order that changed everything. All units, activate Directive 7. Execute immediate. The response was instantaneous and devastating. Every powered-down weapons platform suddenly blazed to life with targeting systems that had never truly been offline. Ships that had appeared to be retreating revealed that they had been moving into optimal firing positions. Defensive installations that seemed to be suffering from mechanical failures demonstrated that their apparent weakness had been carefully calculated theater. The unknown ships found themselves caught in a perfectly coordinated crossfire from weapons they hadn't even known were there. Their reconnaissance drones were vaporized by point defense systems that had been masquerading as communications arrays. Their formations, optimized for intelligence gathering rather than combat, became death traps as concentrated fire converged from multiple directions. But Marcus wasn't finished. All boarding craft, launch immediately. Target the ships that are still intact. I want prisoners, technology samples, and intelligence data. Within minutes, specially modified galactic marines were breaching the hulls of the surviving unknown ships. These weren't ordinary boarding operations, though. Marcus had spent weeks training selected personnel in human-style close-quarters combat, emphasizing speed, aggression, and the kind of unpredictable violence that most galactic species found psychologically disturbing. The unknown aliens, whoever they were, had clearly never encountered anything like a human-trained boarding assault. Their defensive systems were designed around the assumption that attackers would follow conventional galactic warfare protocols, careful, methodical, and respectful of civilian areas within enemy ships. The human-trained Marines followed no such protocols. They moved through the alien ships like a force of nature, systematically neutralizing resistance while capturing anything that might provide useful intelligence. Admiral, Marcus reported as the engagement concluded, we have 7 ships disabled and boarded, 4 ships destroyed, and 6 ships retreating at maximum speed. No galactic casualties, and our Marines report successful capture of alien personnel and technology. Admiral Kethran's skin was cycling through colors that Marcus had never seen before. Cadet, in 47 first contacts with previously unknown species, the galactic community has never achieved such a decisive victory against a potentially hostile force. That's because you've never fought like humans before, Marcus replied. Admiral, this wasn't really about tactics or superior firepower. This was about understanding how predators think and making sure we were better predators than they were. And the aliens who escaped? Marcus smiled with the kind of expression that made most species uncomfortable. They'll report back to whoever sent them. They'll describe how the peaceful galactic community suddenly turned into something that fought like it had been born for war. And then, hopefully, their leaders will decide that maybe they should try diplomacy instead of invasion. And if they don't? Then, next time, we'll be ready for them, Marcus said simply. Because now they know that the galactic community isn't just a collection of advanced civilizations. It's a collection of advanced civilizations that learned how to fight from the species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. As the emergency alert systems powered down and normal operations resumed throughout the academy, Marcus couldn't help but think about his grandfather's old saying, the best weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. Today, the galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't advanced technology or superior firepower. It was the simple, terrifying fact that humans understood violence in ways that peaceful species couldn't even imagine. And now, for the first time in galactic history, that understanding was being shared. S voice boomed through the communication systems. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Unknown vessels have been detected at the edge of the Centauri defense grid. The irony was not lost on Marcus as he grabbed his equipment and headed for the command center. For months, he had been writing theoretical papers about how hostile aliens might attack the galactic community. He had developed detailed scenarios, analyzed potential weaknesses, and designed countermeasures for threats that existed only in his imagination. Now, it seemed, those threats were no longer imaginary. The command center buzzed with activity as officers from a dozen different species coordinated response efforts. Holographic displays showed the positions of unknown ships, their trajectories, and the deployment of galactic defense forces. Marcus found Admiral Kethran standing before the main tactical display, his 6 eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. "Report," Marcus said, falling into the role he had been training for. 17 unknown vessels appeared at the edge of our sensor range approximately 30 minutes ago, the Admiral replied without looking away from the display. "They match no known ship configurations in our databases. More concerning, they appear to be using propulsion technology that our sensors cannot properly analyze." Marcus studied the holographic representations of the unknown ships. They were angular, predatory-looking craft that seemed to absorb sensor readings rather than reflect them clearly. "Have they responded to communication attempts?" "They have acknowledged our hails," Admiral Kethran said, his tentacles coiling with tension. "Their message was brief and untranslatable. Computer analysis suggests it may have been a countdown. How long until they reach the inner defense grid?" "At their current speed, approximately 6 hours. However," the Admiral paused as new data appeared on the display. "They appear to be accelerating." Marcus felt his training kick in as he analyzed the tactical situation. "Admiral, I need to see the exact configuration of their approach vector." The display zoomed in to show the unknown ship's trajectory in detail. They were approaching in a formation that seemed almost random to most observers, but Marcus recognized it immediately. His grandfather had shown him similar patterns in ancient human military texts. "They're testing our response protocols," Marcus said quietly. "This approach pattern is designed to force us to reveal the positions and capabilities of our defensive systems." "How can you be certain?" "Because it's exactly what I would do if I wanted to gather intelligence before launching a real attack." Marcus pointed to specific elements of the formation. "Look at their spacing. They're positioned so that any response we make will reveal the firing arcs of our weapons platforms. And their seemingly random movements aren't random at all, they're probing for weak points in our sensor coverage." Admiral Kethran's skin shifted to the deep blue that indicated alarm. "Are you saying this is a reconnaissance mission?" "I'm saying this is exactly the kind of probe I recommended in my strategic analysis reports. They want to see how we react to an apparent threat so they can plan around our actual capabilities." Marcus turned to face the Admiral directly. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to coordinate our response based on human tactical doctrine." "Explain your proposal." Marcus gestured to the tactical display. "Standard Galactic Defense Protocol calls for our forces to intercept the unknown ships at maximum range, using overwhelming firepower to neutralize the threat. That's exactly what they're expecting us to do, because it's what any reasonable civilization would do." "And what would an unreasonable civilization do?" "Let them come closer," Marcus said with a predatory smile. "Much closer. Close enough that when we hit them, we can capture some of their personnel and technology for analysis." The Admiral's tentacles moved in patterns that indicated he was rapidly processing the implications of Marcus's suggestion. "You are proposing to allow potentially hostile forces to enter our inner defensive perimeter?" "I'm proposing to turn their intelligence-gathering mission against them." "They want to learn about our capabilities?" "Fine. Let's teach them something they'll never forget." Admiral Kethran was quiet for several moments, his 6 eyes independently reviewing different aspects of the tactical situation. When he finally spoke, his voice carried new harmonics that Marcus had learned indicated absolute authority. "Very well, Cadet Chen. You have command authority over this engagement. But I want you to understand that if your strategy fails, the responsibility will be entirely yours." "Understood, sir." Marcus turned to the communications console. "I need an open channel to all defensive platforms and patrol ships." Within moments, dozens of alien faces appeared on the communication displays, representing the commanders of ships and installations throughout the defense grid. Most looked confused about why a human cadet was addressing them, but discipline held them silent. "This is Cadet Chen with Emergency Tactical Authority," Marcus began. "I know this is unusual, but I need you to trust me and follow my instructions exactly. Our response to these unknown ships will determine whether they retreat, attack, or call for reinforcements." Commander Zafake of the destroyer Inevitable Victory, a massive Corellian with armor-plated skin, was the first to speak. "Cadet, standard protocol requires us to engage unknown threats at maximum range. Why are you asking us to allow them to approach our inner defenses?" Because standard protocol is exactly what they're counting on, Marcus replied. Commander, in human military tradition, the most dangerous enemy is the one who studies your tactics and plans around them. These ships aren't here to attack us. They're here to learn how we fight. And how do we prevent them from learning? Asked Captain Veltar of the Orbital Defense Station. We teach them the wrong lesson, Marcus said. I want all ships and defensive platforms to power down offensive systems and withdraw to minimum safe distance from inhabited planets. I want them to think we're retreating in panic. The alien commanders exchanged glances that clearly indicated they thought the human had lost his mind. Commander Zatheke's armor plates were shifting color in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Cadet, the Corellian rumbled, you are asking us to appear weak and defenseless before an unknown threat. I'm asking you to appear like typical galactic community members, Marcus corrected. Peaceful, technologically advanced, and completely unprepared for actual warfare. He paused to let that sink in. Which is exactly what any aggressive species would expect us to be. Admiral Kethran 1 year later, Marcus stood before the largest assembly of military personnel in galactic history. Representatives from 47 member species filled the massive amphitheater on the orbital station that served as galactic military headquarters. The translation devices worked overtime, converting his words into dozens of different languages, tonal patterns, and chemical signals. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, Marcus began. When I first arrived at the Combat Training Academy, my instructor asked me to demonstrate a traditional human weapon. I built a bow from classroom furniture and punched a hole through what was supposed to be indestructible armor. A ripple of what might have been laughter moved through the assembled crowd. The story had become legendary throughout the galactic military, often told as an example of how human ingenuity could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Today, Marcus continued, I want to talk about what we've learned in the year since the Centauri incident, and why that improvised bow represents something much more important than just human stubbornness. Admiral Kethran, now promoted to Supreme Military Coordinator, watched from the front row. His 6 eyes tracked Marcus's movements while simultaneously monitoring the reactions of the diverse audience. The Admiral had supported Marcus's promotion to Strategic Doctrine Commander despite significant opposition from some member species who felt humans were too aggressive to be trusted with galaxy-wide military authority. The aliens who probed our defenses at Centauri were from a species calling themselves the Hegemony, Marcus said, activating a holographic display that showed detailed analysis of the captured ships and personnel. From interrogating our prisoners and studying their technology, we learned several disturbing facts about our galactic neighborhood. The display shifted to show a star map with large sections highlighted in ominous red. The Hegemony has been systematically conquering or destroying every civilization they encounter. They've eliminated at least 12 spacefaring species in the past 1,000 years. More concerning, they've been watching the galactic community for over 2 centuries, studying our defensive capabilities and planning the most effective way to attack us. Murmurs of concern rippled through the audience. Commander Zatheke, the Corellian who had initially opposed Marcus's unconventional tactics, raised one armored hand. Strategic Commander, how do we know they represent a significant threat? Our engagement at Centauri demonstrated clear galactic superiority. Marcus nodded. Commander, you're correct that we won at Centauri. But we need to understand why we won, and what that tells us about future encounters. The display changed to show tactical analysis of the engagement. We succeeded because the Hegemony made the same mistake that most species make when they encounter humans for the first time. Which is, asked Captain Veltar. They assumed that advanced civilizations fight like civilized beings, Marcus replied. The Hegemony's entire military doctrine is based around the idea that spacefaring species will use logical, efficient, predictable tactics designed to minimize casualties and preserve resources. The holographic display showed examples of conventional galactic warfare, carefully planned engagements, measured responses, gradual escalation designed to minimize damage to both sides. It was the kind of civilized conflict that most species preferred, elegant and restrained. Human military doctrine, Marcus continued, is based around a completely different assumption that your enemy is intelligent, motivated, and absolutely committed to destroying you. This means human tactics are designed to be overwhelming, unpredictable, and psychologically devastating. Lieutenant Kexera, who had served as sensor operator during the Centauri engagement, spoke up from her position in the middle ranks. Strategic Commander, are you saying that human aggression is actually an advantage in warfare? Marcus paused, considering how to explain concepts that most peaceful species found disturbing. Not aggression exactly. Flexibility. Humans developed our combat doctrines while fighting other humans. Every tactic we created had to work against opponents who were exactly as smart and resourceful as we were. This forced us to think beyond conventional approaches. He gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the improvised bow he had built in the classroom. When I built this weapon, I wasn't following any established protocol. I was solving a problem using available resources and principles that have worked for thousands of years. That kind of adaptive thinking is what human military training teaches. Admiral Kethran rose from his seat. Strategic Commander Chen, please explain to the Assembly what changes you recommend for Galactic Defense Doctrine. 3 fundamental changes, Marcus said, raising his hand to count them off. First, we need to stop assuming that future threats will fight according to established rules. The universe is full of species that might not share our values of proportional response and civilian protection. The display showed examples of hegemony tactics, planetary bombardment without warning, targeting of civilian populations, use of biological weapons against non-combatants. It was the kind of total warfare that most galactic species had never had to consider. Second, we need to develop doctrine that can adapt to unknown technologies and unexpected tactics. Human military training emphasizes improvisation and creative problem solving because we know our enemies will try to surprise us. And, third? Admiral Kethran prompted. We need to accept that sometimes the most effective response to aggression is overwhelming violence applied very quickly, Marcus said quietly. I know this is disturbing to species that value measured responses, but predators understand only one thing, that attacking peaceful civilizations is more dangerous than leaving them alone. The amphitheater fell silent as the implications of that statement settled over the assembly. For species that had evolved in peaceful environments, the idea of deliberately cultivating capacity for violence was almost incomprehensible. Commander Zoth stood up, his armor plates shifting to colors that indicated deep thought. Strategic Commander, are you asking us to become more like humans? I'm asking you to become harder to kill, Marcus replied bluntly. The galaxy is not as safe as we thought it was. The hegemony is just one example of what's out there. There are probably others, maybe worse ones, watching us right now and making plans. And how do we prepare for unknown threats? Marcus smiled with the kind of expression that had become his trademark, confident, slightly predatory, and absolutely certain. The same way humans always have. We assume the worst-case scenario, prepare for it, and then prepare for something even worse than that. He gestured to the display one final time, which now showed the current state of galactic defenses, integrated human tactical doctrine, cross-species training programs, and defensive installations that could adapt to unexpected threats. A year ago, most of you thought human military technology was primitive. You've learned that primitive and effective aren't mutually exclusive. Now I'm asking you to learn something else, that peaceful doesn't mean defenseless, and civilized doesn't mean vulnerable. Marcus paused to let his words sink in. The bow I built from classroom furniture wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol. It proved that humans can create effective tools from whatever materials are available, using principles that have worked for thousands of years. And what does this mean for galactic defense strategy? Admiral Kethran asked. It means we're ready, Marcus said simply. Ready for whatever comes out of the darkness between stars. Ready for enemies who don't share our values or respect our protocols. Ready to protect the civilizations that choose peace by being better at war than anyone who threatens them. The standing ovation that followed was unlike anything ever seen in galactic military history. 47 different species, each with their own traditions and cultures, united in their understanding that humanity had given them something invaluable, the knowledge that even the most advanced civilization needed to remember how to fight. As Marcus left the amphitheater, Admiral Kethran approached him with news that would reshape the galaxy once again. Strategic Commander, the Admiral said, his tentacles moving in patterns that indicated extreme urgency, our deep space monitoring stations have detected something you need to see immediately. What kind of something? A fleet, Admiral Kethran replied grimly. Much larger than anything the hegemony possessed. And they're not trying to hide their approach. Marcus felt the familiar chill of recognition. How large? Over 3,000 ships. Analysis suggests they represent a coalition of multiple species, all armed with technology we don't recognize. The Admiral's 6 eyes focused on Marcus with laser intensity. It appears that word of our victory at Centauri has spread beyond the hegemony. And, they've decided to test us personally, Marcus said with grim satisfaction. Admiral, how long do we have? 6 months, possibly less. Marcus nodded, his mind already working through tactical possibilities. Then, we'd better get busy. Because if they think defeating the hegemony makes us overconfident, they're about to learn why humans have survived as a species for so long. And, why is that, Strategic Commander? Marcus smiled with the expression that had become known throughout the galaxy as distinctly, terrifyingly human. Because the more dangerous the predator, the more creative we get about killing it. As alarms began sounding throughout the orbital station, signaling the beginning of the largest military mobilization in galactic history, Marcus couldn't help but think about the boat he had built from classroom furniture. It had started as a simple demonstration of human resourcefulness. Now it had become the symbol of something much more important, the galaxy's determination to remain free. The real test was just beginning.